Cool, another 30 seconds. Get anything else down? What is the process you need to go through when you test an API request? Cool. Let's read some of these out. Let's read all of them out. We get the values and then put them in a sort of mock, where we can use it for our code to test, then use intercept to stop telling there's some information, the life information. The life information. What is life information? What is life information?
I meant to write live information.
Oh, live information. Let's see. Mock the API data, intercept the request using a fixture so that you can test a consistent outcome. Find the URL in your API key that you need to add to the end of the URL. Mock the URL using intercept, replace it with a JSON file. They're using curl command in the terminal. Intercept it and replace with copy the object that you will be requesting. Get the required API key and insert it to the URL. Mock the API JSON return value by either calling it once or looking for an example. Hardcode the answer you want to expect. Insert the request to the test and throw in your mock JSON. Underhand, not overhand. It's soft to throw. Make the API request, intercept it, and mock the return to data. Cool. Everyone's on the right lines here. We're trying to essentially replace that response that we get with our own version of it, and not actually send it request. So we intercept that request and provide a stubbed response. Cool. So we're going to do exactly the same approach here for what we're going to do. The API we're going to use in this example is using GitHub API. So let's have a quick look at how we're going to interact with it. So we can open up a new link. There are two ways to use the GitHub API. You can use it unauthenticated or use it when you've authenticated yourself. You don't need to authenticate yourself for this example, for this workshop this morning. You get more data when you authenticate yourself and make the request, but you can still make the request without authenticating yourself. All right. You can have a look at the official GitHub docs at the top here. So if you do want to authenticate yourself, you have to make sure that you generate a personal access token. We don't need to worry about that for this session. So all we need to do is make a request to this URL, api.github.com/users, and then put in your GitHub username. You can put in anyone's GitHub username, and you can find their data, and if that's publicly available, you can access. So let's find out which lucky person. Hold on. I want to get up my randomizer super quickly. Hold on. I need to navigate to the right directory. 1 second. Taking slightly longer, might as well just show you what I'm trying to do. I'm just grabbing everyone's names and making a Let's make sure it's randomized. Casey, all that work was just to get your name.
Okay, fair enough.
What's your GitHub username?
The cozy guy. So THEKOSI and then GUY.
Can you throw it into the Discord channel, your GitHub username?
Sure.
We'll be having to spell it out. Okay, guy. Cool. All right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a request on our command line to the GitHub API. So what we could do is let's find out where we are. You can use curl on your command line and just take this first part here. And then put in anyone's GitHub username. This is the data you get back from the GitHub API. So once you've been able to make a successful request to GitHub API, you can have a look at the information, and this allows you to have an example of the response. This is one of the first steps in our process of being able to make a request, get that example, and just making sure that you have access to that API. We can use the GitHub API, and we're going to do that from within our React app, but we'll also be able to do it from our command line. And the other part that we have to think about is how we do this. So let's have a look at these lifecycle methods. So one way to think about the React lifecycle methods is to think about how you've already been using them in your work so far. We're going to only worry about these two categories here, mounting and then updating. We're not going to worry about unmounting for the moment. So when we talk about mounting, we mean creating the React component and then inserting it into the web page. Updating quite straightforwardly is when something changes. And we've been using a way to change our component using set state. This has been the main way that we've been updating our component and forcing it to re-render. So when you call set state, it does a render. Right, this render method happens automatically. That's why we call it a lifecycle method. We don't need to call it yourself. It happens automatically. So in the same way, you don't need to call the constructor method. It happens automatically. You don't need to call the render method. It happens automatically. In addition, we don't need to call this method component in mount because it will happen automatically. Now we can hook into it by providing it in our component in the same way that we write our constructor function and we write a render function when we want to use them. So this is trying to give you zooming out a little bit about some of the methods you've been already using in your components. So when do these fire? Well, when you create your component, when it renders, the constructor function fires and then the render function fires. So when you create it in the mounting process, it constructs, it renders, and then it also fires a component at mount. So this says once it's completed, once it's fully rendered, then this can trigger. And we're going to use this lifecycle method to trigger some behavior. We're going to say when the component renders, then fire off an API request. So we're going to hook into this lifecycle method, and we'll have a look at doing that. When it mounts and fires, we want to update it with new state. So we're gonna render a component. It will fire off some requests to the API, get some data, and then we'll call set state, and it will go through another render. When it updates, it doesn't do the component mount again. It goes through, and then if you do want to hook up again to something else, you can trigger another bit of behavior after it's updated, but we're not going to worry about this part. So the flow we're going to do is we're going to hook into the constructor and the render automatically. This is what we've always been doing so far. We're also going to add a lifecycle method component in mount. So when the component first finishes rendering, then it will trigger this bit of behavior. We'll get some data from an API. We'll call set state to update it, and it will cause another render. So then it will show that information on the page. Cool. We'll come back to this picture at the end so we can have a look at what we've done, but this is the flow that we're going to do. All right. If you want a little bit more information about individual methods, go have a look here at this link. So let's have a look at everyone's names. No. I didn't really want to close that. So here is a very simple component that doesn't have much in it. On the right-hand side is the Cypress test that we're going to write in a second. I'll call this component a portfolio component because we're going to get some data from the GitHub API and we want to show it on the screen. Let's have a look at it running at the moment. It's got very little inside of it. This is all it is. Same heading that we did. I've changed the heading because isn't that great. So we're going to add some data here in this component down here. So this component on the screen is this one here. All the moment is showing an H1 heading. I've added some console logs so you can see when they fire. Let's have a look. On the right-hand side, if I remove your faces out of the way, move all these lovely Zoom windows, you can see the constructor fires and then the render fires. We go through the first lifecycle method, we create the component, and then it renders. All we're going to do is add another lifecycle method, component did mount. And let's have a look at when this fires. You can see it renders at the end. Component did mount. It fires after it's rendered. All right, lifecycle methods, they go in stages and they provide entry points or hooks that we can say, now do this at this point in time. So we have a little bit more control over the lifecycle of a component when it appears on the page, when it updates, and also when it gets removed from the page, if ever we want to do that. So this is the one where we're going to add a behavior that makes a request to the API. As you might imagine, the constructor function is responsible for setting up the component. The render function is describing what it should show. And the component in mount is giving you access to that stage in its lifecycle to say, okay, now do other things if you want to. So where possible, try and keep the constructor function and the render function quite responsible for their own purpose. And the component in mount, you can add different bits of behavior in. You can also think about how you extract things from it and put them into different files, but let's just keep everything in the component in mount for the moment. All right, keep everything here. So before I add behavior to this lifecycle method, let's write a quick test about what we want to expect to happen. This portfolio is going to shows user data. I'm going to keep it very simple. Shows user data. That's it. Time for naming. Shows user data, and what I want to do is first of all, I've got to visit the page. Then I've got to grab an element and expect that it has, what do I want it to have? Let's go back here. What do I want to show on my page? Let's have a look at the URL. Do you have a picture, Cozy?
The picture, I think just my profile pictures.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah,
Cool
just
car.
that. That's all.
Let's use that one. Expect that it has a picture and a name. Let's keep it simple. Okay, so let's visit the homepage, and then let's get the image. We have to find a way to assert the image in a second. Get image should. I'll have a look at the quick docs in a second, CY, and then we'll get also username. Let's just keep it all conventional. User name and image should contain okay, so we're going to try and get this from the page at the moment. All right. I'm not going to intercept it just yet. We're going to see it work with the API request, and then we're going to stub it. All right, let's do it in a bit by bit. I might just look that up in a second. So let's do this first. Where is my Cypress test? Okay, so running the Cypress test, we're trying to get that element. It doesn't exist on the page, so let's go ahead and update my component. I'm going to get rid of this GitHub thing. I want the username, so let's keep that here and do something like I've got to show here the username. All right, in order to get the username, I've got to give it an ID, but we have to find a way to fire off our request. Now, the way we did request last week, if I remember, we're using jQuery. So let's add jQuery to our project. npm install save dev jQuery. Yeah, probably the easiest way to do this. Install the package for this, and then how do I npm jQuery. What's the import like? Import. Ooh, import. Great. Okay, import jQuery using that as its name, and then inside of here, I want to do something like $.get. What's the URL that I used? I used that. And then let's provide the sort of callback function. Here is where I have to set state. So let's just take all of that data and let's give this property here a name. Let's call it user data. Let's keep it empty for the moment, and then do something like that. Keep that as an arrow function to make sure we are explicit about setting what this is. Okay, so I'm making my request to the API. Whatever is the response, I then take that response and update my component state under the property user data. So once I've set my user data state up here, I can then do something like this.state. What's the key that I need? I didn't actually save it. Just name. This.state.userdata.name. You just have to follow this is an object that has key value pairs. And if you ever want one of these values, you just have to follow the the right key to get to it. So if I wanted to get the company, I would go .company. If I wanted to get anything else, I would just access it from the object by its key. Okay, let's go back to my test. I need to pass in an object, not just like this. Cool. Okay. So my Cypress test is not stubbing the response. It's still actually sending the HTTP request to the GitHub API and getting back that data, but we can see that it's working as expected. I'm getting that user data, and we could probably explore it a little bit more inside of here and do something like console.log and just let's have a look at what data is coming back there. And we can see that I get all of this information back. All right, so this is the information that I get back from my HTTP request, which is so far so good, but the next step is to make sure we stub it. All right, now you can see, let's try and refresh this page. And you can see the phases that we went through in terms of our lifecycle methods. We started off by creating our component, then we render it, then if it fires a component mount, during which we make our API request, and then we, because we call set state, we render again. All right. So just make sure you're keeping an eye out, or at least you're thinking about the phases in the component lifecycle that are happening. And sometimes it's nice to just keep some console log statements at the top of the method, the lifecycle method, to know when it fires and just to keep track of it until it becomes a little bit more familiar to you. Let's try and get that image as well, I guess. How do I Cypress expect CSS? Should have CSS. I can find it. I feel like there's probably a better way to do this. Maybe let's not worry about it for now. Maybe let's not worry about it for now. I imagine there's, I feel like I remember doing this before, and it should be something like should have CSS and then something like let's see what happens. I'd like to see if this could work, but I might have to do this later. If I do something like this, we get the image and we provide a source for it. And the source is going to be this.state.user-data. And that's what I want. Avatar URL. Let's have a look. Doesn't like it. Avatar, maybe that would help. So we see it on the page, but this assertion, I need to provide a user image. Hold on one second. We should be able to get this to work. Veering slightly off track. Might be fun to show this as an example. What do you see? Expected user image to have CSS property. Clearly, I don't know how to do this part here yet. Source. And then is there another value? All right, well, let's leave it here for the moment. I'm going to come back to this and understand actually how to use this have CSS matcher. I can't remember how to use it. So we're not going to do that for the moment. Okay, so let's go ahead and stub our request. And the way that we've been doing that so far is by using our intercept command, cy.intercept, and we provide it a URL, and then we provide it with a fixture. So something like this, I think. No, it's going to be something like this. I'll have to look up the docs in a second. Let's have a quick look. Cypress intercept. Stubbing a response. Intercept the URL, and then we provide it with an object fixture. Okay, so let's add some data into this file, GitHub use data.json. I'll take the example response here, copy it, add it into this. All right, again, still on my clipboard, thanks, Atom. Copy and paste, there you are. To make sure that we are getting the mocked version, let's change one of these values and let's change our spec to make sure that we are successfully mocking it. So I want to make sure that I don't actually make the real request, I'm using this instead. So at the moment, this should now fail the test. Cool. So far it's failing the test. The name is down here, but it's not mocked, and that's the thing that we need to replace. We're replacing the whole HTTP request, and we want to get the value from our file. So here we intercept any of these requests. Like, let's get this one. And we provide it the fixture GitHub user data.json. Cool. So this is now making no requests. The request that does make gets intercepted by Cypress, and then we provide the stub JSON response, which it finds in this file here. Cool. It's still making a request to this URL. So if you really want to go to the next step, I would probably save a local picture in the directory and then provide it the path here. So I'll probably go to the public folder and provide a different file here, so it does actually make that request. We'll have a look at that during the Q&A. So for this exercise, let's take a second to go back out to what we were just doing. Let's go back to the lifecycle methods. We added in a component mount method that hooks into the component lifecycle at the point at which it's finished rendering. So we construct the component, we render it, and then after it's finished, it's mounted, and we trigger the API, or we trigger the behavior to go get data from the API. And then during our this lifecycle method, we call setState, which then causes it to re-render again. So our component, all we did was add this lifecycle method. There's nothing else you need to do apart from adding the method, then the behavior you want inside of it. And then we added some elements here to take data from our state and display it. So in terms of what you're all going to do over the next 45 minutes, I want you to do pretty much the same thing. Create your Cypress test, create a component that uses a component mount, and make sure you can send a request from your command line first, and then stub it for your Cypress test. Your component should render your name, your profile pic, and your username. So start with off your name first, and then see how far you can get with the profile picture and your GitHub username. And then we'll do a Q&A at probably at 11 o'clock, see how far everyone gets, 45 minutes. Any questions before you'll start work? Give me a thumbs up if it makes sense about what you're going to be doing for the next 45 minutes. Okay. Anyone not unsure about what they're going to start doing? Okay. If you're unsure, please ask questions or let me know in Discord. 45 minutes, set up a new project, create a React app, set up Cypress again, get in the habit of setting those things up, and create your component with the kind of Lifecycle method and your Cypress test. And let's come back at 11 o'clock.
Sorry, I have a question.